Welcome to A Really Good Sex Chat, a podcast aiming to open up conversations about disability and sexuality. I'm your host, Candice Karunga, psychosexual therapist and specialist social worker at Care Rehab. Join us as we have frank conversations about sexuality, disability, fertility, pleasure, dating, and everything in between. This podcast is brought to you by Care Rehab and recorded on Darug land. Hello, Andrew.
Hi, Candice. How are you?
Lovely to see you.
Such a pleasure to see you too.
Right, so for folks at home that haven't met you before, Andrew's over in Canada and we're here in Sydney. So this is all of a sudden we're now an international podcast. We've gone across the ocean.
So how cool is that?
Oh, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us on A Really Good Sex Chat and having.
I love the name of your show so much. It's so disability friendly, and I'm sort of jealous that I didn't come up with it. I mean, I love Disability After Dark, but that is A Really Good Sex Chat is golden. Like, that deserves awards. That deserves, awards.
All right, you heard it here first. We're getting the awards. We'll line them up.
Amazing. Good.
Yeah, well, I mean, I hope, as you know, that this podcast is a place for people to have a chance to talk about sex and disability, dating, relationships, fertility, all the things that kind of fall under that umbrella and everything in between. And really hope that this is a resource for both the disabled community and, clinicians and health professionals working in this space as well. That's the goal.
It's, we need more of this. It's such a rare thing in the podcast space. It's a rare thing in the disability space to talk about sexuality. It's a rare thing in the clinical space to talk about sexuality. So it's so needed. And when I'm just happy it's there.
Yeah, well, let's dive in. Let's get straight into it.
Awesome.
Andrew, who are you? Can you maybe introduce yourself for folks?
Hello. Yeah, my name is Andrew Gurza. I'm a disability awareness consultant. I also host the award-winning podcast Disability After Dark, and I've been doing some work for lovely Candice now for almost a year?
Nearly.
Has it already been? Wow.
August will be 2 years. I know our working relationship is going at a
swimmingly.
Yeah, I think time is just flying by. But I was just going to say, we're very lucky to have you writing the blog for Care Rehab. And so for folks who maybe haven't had a chance to read some of the content, we host that up on the Care Rehab website. And I think today, I hope that we can maybe talk a little bit about some of the themes that we've explored in the written space, but now we'll explore them in the audio space.
Yeah, for sure. What else about me? I host the podcast Disability After Dark. I am a world well-known speaker. That feels really, I hate saying that, but it's true. People know who I am. I do a lot of social justice and disability justice advocacy on Twitter and Instagram at Andrew Gurza 6. And my goal is to really bring disability into everyday conversation.
Mm-hmm. Tell me why.
Well, for those of you who can't see me, I live with cerebral palsy. I would classify myself as severely disabled because I need help with everything from scratching my back to dressing to using the toilet to being positioned sexually. I need help with basically everything. So I have started referring to myself as severely disabled. I'm a full-time power chair user. I have attendant care 5 to 6 hours a day. So I need a lot of help. And so in starting this work, when I started as a disability consultant, now 12 years ago, I want to only talk about queerness and disability because nobody at that point was really championing it, at least in my generation, and I felt like it was being completely ignored. And, to be blunt, I was like, I want to get laid. So if I talk about sex and disability and boys, maybe I'll get laid. So, I wanted to experience that because I had had so many uncomfortable experiences in my youth trying to be a sexual being that initially I was like, all I want to do is talk about being queer and having sex and being disabled and having sex. And so I did that for a couple of years. But then I was like, I want to talk more about the everyday experience of living in a severely disabled body, how can we talk about that? And what I found was putting little tweetable content on the internet and just saying, here's my experience. That got me really noticed.
Yeah, it's relatable. Yeah, people were reaching out because it was kind of mirroring some of their own lived experience. That's the feedback I get. We'll talk about your work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can we talk about both of those things, about living with attendant care and all the things that come with being severely disabled, but also about being, you know, a young gay disabled guy growing up in Canada? And what's it like in Canada as a young queer guy?
What's it like in Canada? It's cold 6 months of the year. You know, when I was coming out the first time, because you never stop coming out, when I came out the first time at 16 in the early 2000s, actually, as we record this, my 25th anniversary of coming out is in 4 days, which feels like wow. But when I came out like the end of 1999, the conversation about being queer and just being queer, not even factoring in disability, the conversation was, oh, you come out and then your family kicks you out and then you keep it a secret. And like all the media at that time was, you come out, your family can't deal with it, you're like straight homophobic father says get the hell out of my house, and then you leave. And so everything that I was watching was telling me that if you come out, your family's gonna have a huge problem with it. Don't come out. So everything that I was, all the pamphlets that I was reading at school were, it's okay to be gay, but don't come out in the car, don't come out at Christmas, don't come out at your birthday, so don't come out at all these times. And so I was terrified. I was like, well, if all of the media representation, and the big media representation we had at the time was the original Queer as Folk from 25 years ago, that was what we had that was what a young gay guy had to watch. And I remember watching that in secret, thinking, I want to go to a bar and I want to be 17 and I want some like 25-year-old man to fall in love with me. Like that's what I was seeing being emulated. So I was like, this is what I want. This. I thought if I came out, that all of a sudden boys would be falling over me to have a date with me. I was like, if I do this, I'll have this life. Not understanding that, of course, it's TV and it's stylized and it's not real and that's not realistic. So I came out to my mom, and I remember coming out really vividly. I was sitting at home listening angstily to Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill on my boombox in my window. That's what I had in my house, one of those big 80s boomboxes in my window. And I listened to her, and I was obsessed with all her songs. I was super duper angsty, and I hadn't talked to anybody for like 2 weeks because I was mustering up the courage to come out. And one day my mom was like, what's wrong? Are you gay or something? And I went, well, yeah, actually. And she went, oh. And I, was waiting for her to be, oh, no, that's a problem. And my mom grew up as a hippie in like the 60s and 70s. And she actually lived in Sydney for a while in the 70s. And she, grew up around gay men, so that it didn't faze her at all. She went, oh, all right. Do you find Brad Pitt hot? And I went, yeah, obviously. And so almost immediately she was fine with it, and I had to cry and she had to cry, and I kind of got it out finally. And then she rented Priscilla, Queen of the Desert for me, and we watched that together as my first gay film with my mom. And she says to me, if you want to be a drag queen gay, I'm here for you. And the irony is that 4 years later, when I went off to university, I dressed up one night for the drag competition, and I called her and I said, you'll never guess what I'm doing. I'm in heels and a bra and a dress, and I'm going to do this drag thing. And it's because of her support that I felt comfy to do that. But in coming out, one of the things she said to me was, the gay men are not going to know how to understand you, so just be ready for that. And at 16, you think you know everything. So I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. But then when I went away to school and I experienced the ableism within the queer community, and I tried to enter queer spaces and realized very quickly that I was not welcome there, I'm really glad she gave me that heads up, because it steeled me away to prepare for like the ableism that I would experience and that I continue to experience 25 years later.
I mean, I've seen some of your writing on this, but what is it that you think is kind of contributing to ableism within queer spaces?
Oh, that's a big one. How many hours do we have? I think that ableism in queer spaces has a couple things. I think that we don't see representation of disabled people enough in queer spaces. I also think for queer men, there's a lot of holdover from the HIV/AIDS epidemic 40 years ago. So they watch a lot of their friends go from being fit, handsome young men who were ready to take on the world and be queer to really sick, really frail, dead men. So I think they're really afraid to talk about illness and talk about sickness because it's been drilled into this community, particularly in queer male spaces, that you have to be a gym hunk, not because you necessarily want to be, but because if you don't, a gay man will perceive you as sick or weak or whatever it is. So I think there's a big holdover from the HIV/AIDS epidemic that we're not linking to ableism, which we should be doing. And I think that gay men are just, and I say gay men because gay men are typically who I go for sex. So gay men are just really selfish because they've had to be. They've had to be very self-sufficient. And as a result, they kind of have blinders on, and it's in there, they can't see anybody else except that community. And I think it not only ableism do we have in those spaces, we have transphobia, misogyny, we have racism, all these things in the community that we're not addressing, that gay men, especially in like queer spaces, they think they can get away with because they're gay and they've also been oppressed, which is like true, you have been, but you also have a responsibility to look past that. And so when it comes to ableism, I kind of say like, when you become disabled and you still want to go to the bars in Sydney, and I know how like cool the nightlife is over there, when you want to go to the bars wherever you are, like, and you're in your wheelchair and you still want to have sex and you want to be sexually active, what are you going to do when you're no longer welcome there? How are you going to feel? And so I just kind of remind them that this ability that you have right now is a temporary thing, and you should enjoy it and you should be thankful for it, but one day it won't be there anymore. Instead of saying, well, fuck you, like, how dare you, like, I want to do that because that feels good, but realistically I want to also be like, instead of telling them to fuck off, I want to say like, you know, when you're disabled, I'll be there for you to usher you in. Even though you weren't there for me, I'll be there for you.
I mean, queerness and disability and the intersectionality of that, you know, it's culturally constructed, socially, politically, you know, there's so many factors that, you know, we're not going to resolve in a 45-minute podcast episode. But I do think it's not necessarily talked about.
We're not?
Oh, sorry, Andrew, I should have set your expectations. But in terms of, I guess, like just a community discourse and a language for talking about, you know, inclusion and, you know, even at the hospital level and the health level, you know, we talk about heteronormativity in these institutions, and it's like, we assume all people who come through those doors are straight until proven or discovered otherwise. And so even like at that institutional level, constantly breaking down assumptions, and then into that next like level back into, you know, particularly for the group that maybe have acquired an injury, and also for the group who have lived with their disability their whole life, it's sort of like, this is not my lived experience. What's going to help change this discourse around?
I think from the institutional level, it's hiring more disabled folks in those spaces. So hiring more disabled PTs, hiring more disabled OTs, hiring just disabled people to be your disabled liaison between the doctor and the disabled patient, or the OT and the disabled patient, to be like, I need someone who understands what I'm talking about when I say I am worried that I'll never be able to have sex with my partner because I'm disabled, or I acquired an injury and I'm worried about how my sex life will be impacted. I need someone in the room that gets what I'm saying. And so I think
peer support, like that
Yeah.
peer, yeah.
Yeah. I think not having the person necessarily be a professional, have them be paid obviously and have them as a job, but not have them be like a doctor over the patient talking about this stuff. Have them be just a disabled team member who's like, oh, let me bring in Andrew so he can come and sit with you and talk about your fears around this, and he can spend some time exploring the ableism you're feeling. And really, that would, I think, alleviate a lot of patient fears, but also professional fears of like, I don't know how to talk to this person. I need support.
Yeah.
Here's somebody that can do it.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got the institutional level in terms of, and I see that in our models here in terms of the role of peer support and the collaborating, particularly in the spinal cord injury space. I'm not speaking for other disability areas because I mean there's heaps of work that still needs to be done. And but in the queer spaces, like at a community level, what do you think is going to help sort of break down?
Man, what do I think is going to help? I think that we have so many fundraisers for HIV and AIDS, which are great, and I support them, and they're good. And we have so many fundraisers for just to be queer in a space. Why can't some of those fundraisers also be for a ramp in the space, for an elevator in the space, for a lift, for a hoist in the space? Why can't the fundraisers that we have around, that are centered around cis, able-bodied queer men, also take a minute and think, you know what? I don't see enough gimps in this room. We need to get some more in here. What can we do to do that? And like, they can put some of those thousands of dollars they generate from Mardi Gras and Pride and all those things toward, let's have a ramp in the club. Let's have a ramp in the bathhouse. Let's have an attendant care worker in the bathhouse so that if Andrew wants to blow a guy and then go back in his chair, that's an option for him. Like, they just need to open their eyes a bit and take the blinders off and look at their privilege and realize that, like I said, one day that really buff masculine guy will be in a wheelchair and he's still going to want to have a sex life. And what are we doing to support him?
When you were talking about that relationship with your mum and as a 16-year-old and sort of even having the space to have that conversation is not necessarily the story that I hear from a lot of my clients. You know, like a lot of them are sort of in their 30s and their 40s, some are in their 50s. And I'm exploring sexuality and orientation and gender identity stuff because they've never been allowed to have a conversation. Like nobody has ever seen them as sexual, let alone as gender diverse or sexually even fluid. If you're born female, we'll raise you as a girl and we'll only ever assume that you'll be interested in boys, but the chances of a boy being interested are maybe slim. Like, it's a pretty sad, boring narrative as well. And so then when
bleak.
It's bleak and it's sad, but when we kind of come into therapy spaces and we just have conversation around who they are, like inherently who they are and who they would like to be and how they would like to present themselves, it's incredibly therapeutic. Like, you see people have significant shifts. And so I'm just curious as to what kind of advice do you think your mum would give to other family members, how to see your child as sexual, even as a 16-year-old? I know you're not your mum.
My mum would say, he's my kid and I love him, and if it's what he wants to do, I'm going to support him. And because she lived in Sydney for a long time when she was in her 20s, she kind of had that experience around gay men. And I have other queerness in my family. It never fazed her. Like, she didn't even blink an eye. She just was like, oh, you're queer? And like within 30 seconds, she was like, so do you want to fuck Brad Pitt? And I was like, oh, yeah. But like, so like, it never fazed her. And she still, to all my protestations, is like, can we go to a drag show together? I'm like, no, I love you, but I don't want to. I love you very much, but I don't want to do that with you. She's very, very open about it, and it doesn't faze her. And I think because she's been my primary caregiver since I was born, like, when I go home to see her, she still does my catheter. She still does my primary care if I go to visit for a day. So we're very close in that regard. And I think my queerness doesn't faze her. One of the things that I was afraid to tell her recently, as a couple years ago, was that I work with sex workers. And I remember when I first started doing that, I was terrified to tell her the truth because I thought she would think less of me because I was paying for that service. And I thought all these incorrect ideas of sex work. And so I was very scared. And I would just say, oh, I'm going on a date. And she'd like, oh, who's the guy? Let me meet him. And I'd be like, well, you can't because he's working. And there's no, like, that's weird. No. So one day we were talking about it. And I said, we're on the phone talking about something else. And there was a pause in the conversation. And I said, I have to tell you something. And I was I was more nervous than when I came out about being queer. Way more nervous. And I said, I work with sex workers. And without missing a beat, she went, oh, good for you. If I were in your position, I would do it too. And that was it. That was the end of the conversation. That was it. And we moved on to something else. And it was so freeing because it told me that I then, not that I needed permission, but that I had the blessing of somebody that I care the most about in the world, to say, you know what, if this is your untraditional way of getting your needs met, go to town. As long as you're safe and you feel supported, go to town.
And I think that resonates a lot with the New South Wales context. Sex work's decriminalised here. It's definitely a resource that we explore and discuss in therapeutic spaces as well.
Oh, we don't here. I wish we did. We don't here. It is.
Or no.
It's not decriminalized. It is. What is the thing before decriminalized? It's like. If you're a sex worker, you're not charged. But if me as a client, if I pay somebody, if they know I'm paying somebody for sex, I then get charged with solicitation for prostitution. So it's very much hush hush. We don't talk like it's not. I'm very other than doing it vocally, like but it's. I think socially it's pretty much decriminalized. Legally, it's a bunch of gray areas because I see my sex worker probably once every 2 months for an overnight session, but we don't say it's sex work. We say we're hanging out, and we say it's like which is true. We've been working together now for 8 years, so it is like hanging out, but it's so necessary for me as a disabled person to have that outlet to just be sexual for an hour, whether that means we have sex or not, great, but there's somebody that wants to engage with that with me. And yes, it's transactional, and yeah, that part is hard and that part is tough for me because there's an old part of me that wants it to be romantical and wants to be all the stuff, and having to, I think, shove that away and see it as a transaction and be okay with it being only a transaction is, I think, both good because it builds boundary and it teaches you that things can look different, but also having to say goodbye to the fantasy in your head. That's hard. It's a hard truth to grapple with. And every couple of months when I engage with a worker or a new person, or I want to hire a new person to come over for an hour or something, and I see how quickly my intimacy is monetized, it's like, wow, that's okay. All right. So that can be hard, but I'm thankful that it's there, and I'm thankful that I have found a few workers that I trust and that I feel safe with. Because of the severity of my disability, if somebody wanted to assault me or take advantage of me, it would be very easy for them to do so. So I'm lucky in that I've found workers that I trust, that I'm comfy with, that know my body and know my disability, and I can call on when I'm like, hey, I want to get off today. What are you doing at this time? Are you free? Mm-hmm. So it's nice to have that. I just wish it was readily available everywhere, and I wish that in places like Canada there was a stipend for, hey, you want to get off? Here's $1,200 for you to use at the end of the month. I'm not sure how the NDIS does it, but something like that. $1,200 at the end of the month to do that, or something like that.
Yeah, just like an acknowledgement that it's not an equal playing field in terms of access, and that there's an economic challenge to being able to have some needs met that aren't like the peers in the community. So I I just want to go back to what you were talking about before in terms of like, maybe even recruiting new people and trying to have your sexual needs met in an environment that's sex positive and respectful and non-judgmental. And I know you at the very beginning there, you kind of talked about having, 5 to 6 hours of attendant care a day. And I'm just kind of curious as to, what your experience has been like with the recruitment of formal supports. Like, it sounds like your mum's been awesome, but your formal supports, is it the same story, or is it there are some challenges?
They're awesome, but where I live in supported housing here, which means that I live in my own apartment that's subsidized by the government. And because it's subsidized by the government and it's supported housing, there's care staff through an agency that are working 24 hours. So yeah, they're on site.
We would call that concierge care in Australia, but yeah, exactly the same.
Yeah. So it's concierge care, but I have no control over who they are. I have no say in the hiring process. I have no say in the firing process. So it is really hard to get comfy talking about sexuality and talking about masturbation and talking about sexual positioning, which is part of why I started looking for a sex worker that I could just train up on what my needs are and not worry about that, because they're doing a job. Didn't sign up to help Andrew get off today necessarily. I don't feel super comfy always asking them for that and asking them for like supports in that way to set me up for masturbation. I mean, I have done with a few staff here that I trust and know. I'll say like, hey, can you set me up to self-pleasure and then go away for half an hour and then come back? Or can you help me take a sexy photo and then I can have for my grinder? Thanks so much. But that takes a lot of trust building. That takes time. I can't just say to anybody, yo, I want to pull my junk out and take a photo. Can you do that? Like that. It's such a delicate discussion because there's not enough on the training side for them of your client might want to masturbate. What are you going to do? Your client might want to be sexually positioned. What are you going to do? Your client might want to take a raunchy photo and need your help. What are you going to do? There's no real discussion of how do you train that with somebody. And so I think it's really easy as the client to become desensitized to your own body. And so I often because I have so much care in my day where they're touching me and like wearing gloves and supporting me, when I get the chance to be sexual, it feels really weird for a little bit because I'm like, oh my God, I get to touch you and you're going to touch me back and it's going to feel nice. What is it? Like, what? It's very, it's very a weird feeling that I'm thankful for, but it is strange because we're taught as clients, they're there to help you with your bodily functions, everything else. So you learn kind of innately to shut that part of your brain off because you don't want to make them feel uncomfortable. They don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. It's very professionalized, which I'm thankful for, and I think that boundary is necessary. But I think it does a lot to the psyche of the disabled person of like, oh, okay, so my body is going to be cleaned and washed and touched, but I can't talk about what happens if I come or if I have an erection or if I'm living the experience. I'll be blunt. I'm living the experience right now because I can't masturbate. Sometimes I'll auto ejaculate, which is real fun. And so that you think that sounds really sexy. It's not. It's actually very, very frustrating because I'll be sitting here working or doing something and my body will just ejaculate, which is like, okay, yeah. So like, what do you do? And so I've recently discovered that people with cerebral palsy are 36% more likely to have premature ejaculation and those kind of things. And so that makes me feel better from a statistical standpoint, but from a lived experience standpoint, I'm like, man, that's really annoying. Like sometimes when I pay thousands of dollars for the sex worker to come over, he'll get into bed with me and within 5 seconds I've come, and it's like, well, that's not, I didn't want that like that. Yeah. So I think having all this clinical touch really fucks with your sense of your body, and it takes a long time for me to feel in my body a lot of the time, if that makes sense. I went off on a bit of a tangent there, but yeah, like it.
I think what you're talking about here is the difference between clinical touch and romantic or erotic touch.
Yeah.
And they're different, and we dare not confuse the two, because of course that's when people get, you know, labeled as having sexualized behaviors. Or on the flip side, they kind of end up having almost like a disassociation with opportunities for intimacy.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, I'm here but I'm not here. And so, you know, from a therapeutic perspective, in terms of the work that I'd be doing, it's more around that somatic work. Like, how do you come back into your body quickly? Do you have exercises or activities or things that you consciously do to come back into your body?
I mean, I watch a lot of porn. I watch a lot of sexually themed content because I'm like, look, if I can't have anybody touch me, you can sure as shit bet that I'm gonna watch that sexy movie and enjoy every second of it. And in terms of coming into my body, I do a lot of breathing. I tell myself that it's all right, because for me, and it's an unfortunate, like, I think this is my own internalized ableism. My initial thought after I've prematurely ejaculated when I didn't want to, or auto ejaculated, is like, well, you failed. That's a failure. And so getting myself in a space of, it's not a failure, it's a bodily function, it's okay, you're still worthy, you're still valuable, someone's gonna want you, and if they don't, they're not worthy. Like, getting myself into a space of consciously being okay with it has been really hard. And this only started happening 5 or 6 years ago. I deal with it now, and it happens sometimes once a day, sometimes not at all. Sometimes when I want to have sex, I'll just ejaculate within 5 seconds, or not at all, which both is like, I really wish that my body would just listen to me. And so getting over the internalized ableism of my body doesn't even work this way. Like, I was with my worker a few months ago, and we were messing around, and I realized mid blowjob that I couldn't do what he wanted me to do. And was he really enjoying himself? And then the thought of like, well, I'm paying him, so is he pretending to enjoy this even if he doesn't? Like, what? I don't. So it was very jarring.
Cognitive things that.
Yeah, it was
like,
very.
I should be in my brain. I should be in my body.
Yeah, exactly. I was very jarred in that moment to realize, wow, I can't do a lot, and that kind of hurt. Wow, my body can't do a lot. That's scary. What can I do to give this guy pleasure? Because most people, when they have sex with somebody with my level of severity, they think, if I pleasure him, I've done him some big favor. And I'm always like, no, I want to make sure that you are also enjoying yourself. Otherwise, what are we doing here? Why are we doing this? Reminding people, especially able-bodied men that I've been with, that like, I want to give you pleasure also. If I can't, then we have to reevaluate what we're doing. I'm not a charity case, and if you're gonna see me that way, we probably shouldn't have sex. Like thanks so much, see you later. So back to your larger question, how do I get into my body? I go outside a lot now that it's spring here and finally warm. We just had like 6.5 months of snow hell. So now that it's finally warm in Canada, when it's a nice day, I go outside and I walk around. There's a park by my house, and I just be in the nature, and I don't worry about anything my body is doing. I just, oh look, there's a bird on a tree. Cool, I'm gonna look at that for a minute. Oh look, there's a kid with his family, like a toddler with his family. I'm gonna watch them for a minute. Like, really just grounding myself in, this is the world around me, I'm going to enjoy it.
I think when we think about sex, it's sensory, right? Like, sex is in the brain, and it's experienced through our senses. And one of the most important things we could be doing is working on our senses, aware of what we smell, taste, touch, hear. And if there wasn't a moment where people are saying, oh, I'm stuck in my head, and particularly if the self-talk is unkind or the self-talk is very distracting, you know, some of the activities that we might practice therapeutically would be, well, what are you noticing now? What can you smell? What can you taste? What can you hear? And sort of kind of bring people back into where they are, rather than having this sort of cognitive, you know, intellectualized interaction, which should be something more embodied.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that would be my tips for coming back into the body. And I think the daily practices of getting out into nature is 100% like a winning strategy.
It's one of my favorite things, is to just be outside and be like, and I'm one of those like true crime murder girlies, so I will put on my big earphones, I'll put those on, and I'll go outside and I'll put on like some murder podcast. I go for an hour, and that's my hour of like alone time, myself time, not worrying time, and out of center with myself a little bit. And that I really value that. If I lived in Australia, I'd be doing that every day, every day.
In the sun, kind of just recognizing like warmth and then recognizing cold, because all of that allows people to become more and more present with the body as well.
Yeah.
I think something else that I'd wanted to chat to you about today was around gender identity. I can see here you've written they, he pronoun on your handle already today. And I'm just curious as to why and how and kind of tell me more about gender identity from your perspective.
Yeah, I have privilege as a cis male person, definitely. But I've always kind of felt like there were two parts of me, the more fluidy part and then a staunchly masculine part. But what I realized when I entered into queer spaces as a disabled person, my masculinity was completely ignored, completely undervalued, completely underused, completely underthought about. And so when I started seeing people play with pronouns and choose pronouns for themselves, I was like, well, let me just try they, them for a little bit. When I'm in queer spaces where I don't feel supported, let me remove this expectation of masculinity from myself and just be an experience. And they, them was kind of like a fuck you to, for me anyway, the able-bodied queer expectation of what a man is supposed to be. I don't fit any of that because of my disability, and so they, them is my way of saying I don't fit your normative idea of maleness. I want to express that. It doesn't take away from the privilege I have. I consider myself non-binary, but I don't think that removes the privilege of being read as a man. I have privilege of going into male spaces, being seen as a man. I'm not saying that like, I don't have that privilege. I'm saying I do, but it's my way of connecting with the more femme side of myself, the more queer side of myself, and it allows me to be whatever I need to be right in that moment. And there's something really cool about that.
Thank you for sharing that. And I really just want to say thank you for sharing so much today in terms of this opportunity to reflect on your queerness and gender, as well as living with severe disability and navigating sex and dating and opportunities and working with carers. I mean, like we've covered so many topics. I think there's a rich amount of learning in this chat. So I just really want to say thank you. Is there anything else that you wanted to add tonight?
It's such a pleasure to be, first of all, I love being guests on other podcasts because I get to just chat. It's so fun, so I appreciate the opportunity. And I would say to anybody, whether you're living with an acquired disability or you're living with a lifelong disability and you're in Australia or anywhere in the world where you're listening, talk to your care team and your doctors about getting care around your experiences as a disabled person and around your sexuality. And if your doctor can't handle that, look for a new doctor. And I know that's not always the easiest, but start really prioritizing your right to your own sexuality, because no matter how your disability shows up in the world, you deserve a care team that is going to support that.
100%. And I hope that like this conversation today not only helps the disability community, but also the able-bodied community to kind of pause for a second and think, yeah, you know what? Guy in the chair is sexually viable and a potential for me.
And he's hot. So like, what? Yeah. And to the non-disabled people, I would say, what are you going to do when you're disabled? What are you going to do when it's your turn? Who are you going to go to when it's your turn to be a wheelchair user and have hopefully by the time that happens for you, you'll have resources. But if you don't, like I said at the beginning, I'll be there to hold the door for you regardless. I hope that you recognize that even if you're not disabled now listening, you know somebody who is disabled listening, and you yourself will be disabled, and maybe hopefully you'll listen again when it's your turn.
Well, thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much for being with us. And if anyone wants to follow you, tell us what your Instagram handles are so people can follow your work as well.
Yeah, they can go to Andrew Gurza and the number 6, because 6 is my birthday, and I just was like, I want to be cool, and instead of like 1, 2, or 3, I was like, 6 is great. So Andrew Gurza 6 on Instagram, where I'm most active. I have Twitter, but Elon Musk ruined that platform, so I'm not on there as much anymore. Um, and you can follow me at andrewgurza.com to hire me for talks and gigs and writing and stuff like that.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. Until next
Thank you for
time.
having me.